welcome back. Thought I lost you there for a second. Remember, tonight depends on your ability to have an open ear, to have an open mind, to have an open heart, and to find yourself as honest you can be. So come with me and let's take a windy walk into the abyss. And as a final reminder, what you're doing here. In order to conquer hell, one first must become hell.
The program you are about to hear is fiction, science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction, fiction, fiction.
Strategic salutations, Cognonauts, and welcome back to another episode of Exofathom, the show where we dare to explore the fringes of thought, where I fumble my words sometimes. As always, I'm joined with my two lovely co-hosts, Nick and Ayla. How y'all doing?
Hello. Hey, how are you? I'm good. How are you?
You know me, man. I'm hanging in there.
Good. That's great to hear. My Psychotech is a bit broken right now, so apologies.
I'm gonna say, hey, hello, how are you? How you doing? Hey.
Hey.
It's like 6 salutations.
Hey now.
Right.
How you doing over there, Ayla?
I'm good. I just had some toast, so I'm good.
Just toast, just bread.
Just bread and
Nick
butter.
Have you in like in a cellar somewhere?
It would sound like that. No, I'm a big fan of toast. I like it.
And the problem is that she likes her toast butter side up, and I like mine butter side down. So we constructed a wall in our house. She's not allowed on my side of the wall.
It's like a 90s sitcom.
It's a Dr. Seuss book. You guys didn't read that Dr. Seuss book?
I didn't have a childhood, sir.
Was that the green eggs and ham thing?
No. It was a whole book about how there were two separate societies, that one liked the butter side up on their toast and the other like butter side down, and they went to war with each other.
Oh my God, this is like right on line with Psychotech. That seems like some subliminal childhood messaging, and I'm over here with my toast, and maybe you're over there with your toast. I was very like off-put by the idea of butter being under the toast. Like,
see?
No.
I'm
really serious about that.
When you butter pancakes, do you just put one giant thing on top?
No.
Layer
inside.
No, I layer it like I do my movie theater popcorn. I'll be that person that's like, excuse me, can you put a little popcorn, then butter, then a little more popcorn, then butter, and like layer it?
All right, so I've been on this whole research thing for decades on how to make the perfect nachos, and I found that you have to layer the chips, then the cheese, and whatever you want to put on that, then another layer of chips, then another layer of cheese, and that's the best way to do it, just like the layered popcorn.
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan. Anything worth eating is layered. Lasagna. You mentioned your chips.
My sister growing up was such a savage. She used to have nachos by putting Tostitos on a paper plate and putting shaky cheese on top and putting it in the microwave.
Oh God,
disgusting.
Wait, what is shaky cheese? Like Parmesan?
No, just like like loose 3-blend Mexican cheese from the store or whatever.
Wow.
My worst was I was very stoned one night, and I just grabbed a bag of Lay's. I just threw it on the plate and just threw whatever, like not even shredded cheese. Just took a block of cheese and just throw
a block of cheese on top of it. Crushes all the chips.
Oh God!
Your plate goes flying.
I put it in the toast, put it in the toaster oven, and it turned out exactly how you expected it to. But it was delicious because I was very stoned.
You know what's funny? I remember this one Christmas, all my mom's sisters got together. And one of them, I don't know where she got this recipe. I think she made it up in her head. She's like, this would be really good. She made like, do you remember Fritos? Those chips, Fritos? They're sort of lackluster. They're not a Dorito. It's like a Dorito.
Yeah, we know
without...
what Fritos are, Ayla.
Okay, I'm just reflecting on the nature of a Frito. Yeah, it's like it's missing something and then it's thick. But she used Fritos and hamburger meat and cheese to make some kind of a like
casserole.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it was horrible.
It is horrible. It's like
and we talked about it
Depression
for
era
like
food.
That sounds great to me. I don't know what you're talking about. I heard it in my eyes.
I
was
get
like,
you. In theory, it sounds really good, but I think like legitimately people got sick that Christmas. Like we never let her forget it for like a solid decade. And oh, my aunt, poor thing.
Oh my god, that sounds great. Well, somehow there's going to be a hard segue into to Psychotech Part 2. I think so. I think the first time we covered mental and embodied psychotechs, just for a refresher, are kind of like technologies that your brain can use to kind of change the world, or not change the world, change industry, things that you're working in, whether it be working on yourself, working on an actual work project, things like that. The proper definition for it would be the application of psychological methods and results to the solution of practical problems, especially in industry. Or the secondary definition is an application of technology for psychological purposes, as in personal growth or behavioral changes. Do you remember the first episode kind of went over like mental and embodied stuff? Has there been any changes that you've worked, like have you started to do a different kind of yoga, or like added meditation into it, or have you started to
No, I think we're gonna have to go over the whole episode again. So can we recant that?
Nick.
All right, we're starting from this one.
Yes,
Embody.
thank you. Okay. Good.
No, my heart. I'm not. I'm just gonna leave. I'm just gonna.
I don't know.
Oh,
if
You're
I-
happy now.
Yeah.
I'm just going with you.
I can't say that I have honestly utilized any new psychotech. Maybe I have.
Well,
No. Huh?
I was going to say, if you want to have some more time to think, I definitely
it.
have something that came to mind.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
So I liked the last episode. Definitely a really cool way to contextualize all the different digi things that are coming at us every day. And one of the things I actually ended up reflecting on afterward was those like those task management apps. So it's, those applications where they use AI assisted technology to help you maximize your day. Now, I didn't want to use the app because I don't want all my daily habits on some app. Like, that still kind of sketches me out, putting all your information like that. So I ended up creating like an Excel spreadsheet, and I don't have any AI, but I sort of implemented the same practices of saying, okay, these are all the things I want to do in a week. And I'm just going to like split them up by the days in the week, so it's more manageable. And it's been amazing. I don't have to think about my day whatsoever. It's just there. Oh, I'm bored? Boom, clean the kitchen. Oh, I'm bored? Boom, play piano. I mean, it's all spelled out. And what's really beautiful is that I found myself at about 9 o'clock one day thinking to myself, wow, I got my whole day in. I did sleep. I did everything on my checklist. I have 4 extra hours before I have to go to bed, and it was delightful. So in terms of that sort of like, I don't know, wrangling of decision making, I thought that was kind of a cool little thing. I'm only on week 2
Ayla's
though,
an optimizer now.
Yeah, Cold War.
Well, I think that's pretty cool that you've gotten into what would be called like the gamification of existence.
Yeah.
Like trying to get all the things done, like their quests in a MMORPG.
Oh, I have batting averages for myself too. I take everything and I say, okay, what did I do? Divide that by what I didn't do and get a little decimal going.
Oh, you gotta be careful of that. Like, give me those numbers. I can start to predict how much you could get done within a week.
Well, you have to take into account outliers. There's stuff you can't predict, so that'll throw me off. But I do catch up in a week's time if I'm tracking it. So that was kind of cool.
Looks good. And then too, like I think a lot of the purpose of utilizing this stuff is to get into that flow state. Right? We talk a lot about the notion of Wu Wei, the notion of like effortless action, where you don't think about the things you're doing, you just simply complete the task. And that's sort of a great place to be in as far as existence goes, right? It makes the mundane not mundane, and allows you to divide and conquer the overwhelming tasks and start to break things down.
Yeah, and I like the idea that you brought into a flow state, because I think when you have a day where you're like, oh, I have to work 8 hours and do like 5 hours of rehab, and I want to do all these other things, it gets really overwhelming really fast. But if it's broken up, I don't have to think about the whole day. I'm just in the moment doing my little thing, And what's really funny though is that I've become, within just a week or two, so happy with my little mapped out agenda that if something derails it, I'm very upset. I'm very upset that like I have to renegotiate my columns all of a sudden.
Going hardcore type A there.
It's true. It's true.
But it's interesting. I guess today what we're going to get into a bit too is kind of what happens when everything goes off, when you're when the psychotech has to become like psycho weapons, when you kind of have to break away from like not routine but that flow state to try to force things to happen.
Oh, I have stories.
Wow.
I have stories. No, I mean, but it is true. Like you can feel the shift in your physiology, when you are just in the moment doing exactly what you have to do with really nice focus, and there's no future, there's no past, you're just there, versus like, oh, okay, I have an interruption, now I have to adjust, wait, now I have to think about what I can adjust, how that affects this other, oh no, there's a second interruption, okay, wait, which is for, oh no, there's a third, oh no, now I have 10 tabs open, and you can see it, like it breaks down, you get all stressed out, and then you can't think and you get aggro, and you're like, wow, that went down fast, so I think it's interesting too, because that's sort of like giving in to the external factors, as opposed to sort of like trying to root in that mindfulness or that groundedness that lets you sort of say, okay, I'm going to pivot mindfully and be really easeful about it and not get sort of like swept up in the chaos of life.
Definitely, right? And we kind of get caught up in we can get caught up in cognizing, basically using too much cognition, that sort of like all those columns, all listing everything out, do this and this, and then when something breaks that, we lose that flow state, that wu wei sort of thing, right? And then you have to do everything to get back to that state, or try to, or you could just say screw it, right?
Yeah, but I think when you sorry, just you said something about cognitizing things. I do think that having tracked my time for a little while. You okay, Nick?
Yep.
Okay. Having tracked my time for a little bit, it has made me more aware of how much brain power goes into a day without that sort of, maybe just like a general scaffolding, like I don't have every minute mapped out. I just know that at any given point I can work on one of these things. And I notice a reduction in cognitive load for sure.
Nice. Yeah. I imagine as the type that has every second planned out, not every minute.
No, not at all. No. It's literally just a column. And then it's like, I'm like, okay, well, how do I feel?
It's not just a column.
Well, it's got a lot of rows.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
it's a table.
It's a table, yeah. But I mean, like, I don't have at 9 a.m. I do this.
You might as well have. You make leisure. Honestly.
No, I just make sure to make time for leisure. It's important to me. I'm trying to have my time usage aligned with my values.
I need my 36.7 minutes of leisure time every 3 hours.
42.39, thank you.
Yeah.
That's quite a Virgo thing to do,
Mm-hmm. Libra rising, gosh darn it.
You're close enough.
No, I don't come off as Virgo. I come off as Libra. And I'll hold to that.
Shaping things to that. Never mind. Now we're getting into like the shit I don't want to get into.
I'm sorry.
But,
Go ahead.
having three things. Yeah. I was in a Q&A with like I wasn't in the Q, I was in the audience of the Q&A with Robert Rodriguez. Someone asked him about this thing of writer's block, right? It was like some podcast I went to down in Hollywood. And they asked him like, so what do you do when you hit writer's block? And kind of scoffed at the question, but he was like, I always have some other project to work on. I think that's sort of cool from a like technological point of view of always having this other thing you can do. And if something kind of throws you off a little bit, during your day, always being able to pivot like that into another project is pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd co-sign that. And, contrary to Nick's chastising of my columns and rows, one of the beauties of it is that each day has stuff that's like physical stuff, outside stuff, brain stuff, organize, like there's different types of things that I've spread out across the week, because I know some mornings I wake up and I'm just like restless and I want to, work out maybe, or other days I wake up and I'm like slow to start, and so that's a good morning activity to just do something mindless that I didn't want to do, so I think using those, I don't know, internal states to navigate your day, I could see that. And for him, like, he's got writer's block, pivot to something else.
Definitely. And this is kind of breaking out of the like the more militaristic idea of having like one set thing and you use discipline to plow through that thing. I think having multiple branches fits more of a civilian or even a creative lifestyle or a creative life path. Maybe might be the better word to use. But here comes the hard transition. So I have a question. What's your drug of choice?
Coffee, obviously.
Yeah, coffee. Nick, drug of choice.
That's a good question. I mean, the one I use most often is coffee. Yes, caffeine. If we're talking about, I don't know, illicit materials, I don't really know if I have one now that I'm older. But when I was younger, I was much more into, I guess, downers than uppers. I have a very nervous energy innately, so I never was really into anything too heavy. So it would have been maybe, a sneaky, cheeky pill once in a while or something along those lines. More in the downer range.
I got you. Yeah, coffee, caffeine is, I think, like the largest psychoactive drug used in the Western world, right? Which means if you sell coffee, congratulations, you're a drug dealer.
Yeah, sure. According to the Mormons. Yeah.
See, the funny thing is, like, I've kind of, I guess, relaxed that definition of drug. Like, mine has always been hope. I've always used that, even as an ingest or an answer.
Well, that's cheating.
How is that cheating?
Because I could say popsicles are my favorite drug. Then.
Hey, man, you might be a big sugar addict.
There you
Diabetes,
go.
Ice cream
all the time.
Ice cream is one of his little faults of late.
Hey, ice cream is never a fault. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, you know what? Fair point.
What kind of ice cream?
Hobbies.
Wait. What kind of ice cream? Because this might actually become important.
Oh, it's good. Yeah, I'm currently mint chip with chocolate or Oreo cookies in it. It's pretty good.
I think it's called like the Cookie
varies.
Monster or something like that.
That is good. I got chastised for liking mint chip once. That it wasn't
Mint
a real
chip is
ice cream.
delicious.
That it was a medicine. That it was disgusting, and I was completely weird for liking.
Oh my God, you are in good company, my friend.
Mint chip is for the aristocracy. Don't let those plebs tell you.
I have a nice little tub in the freezer, actually.
There we go. Awesome. Yeah, no. Well, I would say hope, and then when hope ran out, when you turn to external substances, For a long time, it was. I mean, you know, but for a long time, it was like uppers, um, sativas. When we get to like marijuana type stuff, and then just because it helped my brain kind of focus on the task, I tend to have like a scatterbrain thing. Like one of my favorite things to do during university was like have a hit of like a Jack Harrier, and then go to machine learning class and just think about the formulas and all the equations. And it was because of that was the first time I was actually able to sort of visualize higher like n-dimensional spaces, like kind of get a better understanding of space past like 4D space when you're talking about abstract mathematics. So that's kind of like the thing I want to focus on today is how substances and drugs as a whole can be used to kind of aid you in this problem solving ability in spaces where you necessarily don't think that would be true.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Corey's here. He got an addition for you there, Mike. Social media dopamine hits might be giving coffee a run for its money in the West today.
Oh, spitting truths.
What's up, Corey?
Yeah, thanks, Corey.
Yeah, that might be very true. But don't let them start charging us for that. We gotta keep net neutrality of things.
Could you imagine if people started saying, "All right, well, no, I want my free dopamine," and so they just queue up in a line and present each other with like photos and get like a real life thumbs up for free?
Oh my god! Imagine if you had to pay like 3 cents a tweet.
Oh no. Do you remember? Okay, I'm probably dating myself here, but when the AOL came on, I think about a couple years after AOL started to gain steam, the United States Post Office actually wanted to start charging a fee
for email.
Each email. Yeah, that was a thing. It was quickly by popular demand squashed, but you know. But it was kind of funny that they wanted to do that. Imagine.
Yeah, they don't have that same dopamine hit. And now that like everyone's hooked on Twitter for free, imagine if you just do like a per tweet thing, like just a little small one, not where you notice it.
Personally, I'd be okay with charging for emails again.
You know what? Yeah, if it could cut down on emails, I mean, you think about it. Yeah, not bad.
I mean, as long as it's work emails, like if they charge the company, I'm fine with that. I don't need 1,000 emails in my inbox every day.
Or what if your friend emails you and they're like, "Hey, what's your favorite ice cream?" And you're like, "You wasted 3 cents on that. Now I have to reply. You're pushing me to spend 3 cents now." Like, or
it was like back in the day with cell phone usage. We were like, "Don't call me until 7 p.m. All right, or 8 p.m.
Oh, right?
I can't talk to you because
I only have 5 more minutes for the month left."
Yeah.
Fucking stupid. Can't believe we did that shit.
It worked for so long though. We're like, I only have like 200 texts. I can't text you right now. Sorry.
Honestly, and Corey is right on. He says, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And it's so true. They're just giving phones out like candy now, for reasons. Nice
little tracking units. Yeah, and data. I mean, data is oil nowadays, right? That doesn't even have to be particularly good data. As long as it's just data, you can sell it like crazy.
Yeah, apparently it just doesn't matter what it is. Yeah. People just buy it.
But kind of pulling back to more like the pharmaceutical use. I think the technical definition where this sort of stuff falls into the pharmacological set of psychotechs and includes compounds that modify cognition. Nootropics, such as caffeine, cannabis, psychedelics. Do you think it's ethical to use this sort of stuff within a working an industry? Like if you have something to solve, you have a deadline, and you got to work through the night, and you just happen to have a little bit of a powdery substance, and that helps you get through that little work block because you've been working for a long time or something like that.
I'll tell you what doesn't feel good is when you get through 4 years of college and you stayed up so many nights and you suffered through every essay while you realized that people were just popping Ritalins and like getting stuff done super easy and you were like slogging through the trenches. It's like I think when it starts to enter into like work stuff, that's a competitive advantage, right? If that's like a work culture kind of thing.
It is and it isn't. I don't know. I don't know if it's an advantage. I don't know if it's an advantage all the time, but I think that it's just one of those things that we sort of look away from. You think about truck drivers and speed, or now they're doing heavy amounts of B12 vitamins or whatever. If they're trying to keep it legal. But there's usually like high stress, high paced jobs usually require an amount of brain alteration for the people working those jobs.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, I do think it's competitive edge. Like, take it to sports, right? With baseball and steroid use or any sort of competitive environment, highly competitive environment. You are going to see people that take these, like, try to take these substances in order to get that edge. And sometimes you got to get things done. I've had some friends that worked within the defense sector back in the 80s, building airplanes. And some of the stories that I've heard from them, it makes sense why those airplanes are real good, but it has to be a real short-term solution, right? It's a great short-term solution, I think, but a horrible long-term solution. Because then you get into those throes of addiction and your brain doesn't quite work the same way that it used to before.
Yeah. Corey's got one here. Says one of his welding jobs had cheap energy drink dispensers. Stuff is like meth for overtime.
Right. Energy drinks. My brother's so addicted to them. Like, I'll be really blunt. Monster gave him an ulcer, and the doctors were like, "You need to stop drinking it," and he just won't stop. He's still drinking them. Energy drinks. It's just so bad.
Well, freedom, I say. Liberty. If you want to eat yourself to death, if you want to drink energy drinks to death, so be it.
I haven't said a word to him. I just judge him silently. We're now like on a podcast. Sorry, bro.
There's been a few times where I've had to pull the energy drink and kind of really feel like the energy drink and the espresso and all of that, to the point where it's like, yeah, just today has to be the day that I got to get this thing done. And it has to be done within the next 12 to 16 hours. And there's no fucking if, ands, or buts about it. The software has to be written. It has to be done. And I don't know if it's like we hear a lot about work-life balance, right? And I have no idea what that is for me, because life is work, in my opinion. So as long as I'm passionate about the project and I get the thing done, I don't really care about the damage onto my body if I know that I can recover. Or not recover, but if I know that the thing got done.
Yeah. I'd like to modify my answer, actually, for substance of choice. I think adrenaline is mine. And it usually just kicks in high stress situations, because I notice that if I have an obstacle on my path that's sort of like throwing off my homeostasis, I cannot let it go until that fucking thing is done. If it means staying up for too long, or, driving for a whole day or whatever, Ayla will tell you, we make trips up to Northern California that are like 10 to 12 hour drives, and I just go through the entire ones and like minimal breaks.
He's so intense. You won't stop. But
I can't.
twice.
I just can't. I
For
like
900 miles.
Once my mind locks onto something, it needs to be fucking handled, or else I don't eat, I don't sleep. Yeah, it gets bad.
Yeah. I had to pack MREs.
It's efficient.
Highly efficient.
Yes.
I remember driving with you, and like we're going up. I'm like, oh shit, I gotta take a piss. And I look at you, and it's like you're just.
You can't even ask him. You know the answer.
I'm like, is anybody going to notice if I roll down the window, stick my hand out the window? We got to keep going. We got to keep going forward.
Yes.
And the best was like, one time we drove with another friend, and they were taking shifts, because we left at like 8 p.m. like after work, after dinner, and then we were like, let's just drive 9 hours and get to where we want to be tonight. And so right around 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. they started pulling out like Skrillex and Knife Party, and it was just like, we're getting there. And it was intense, but they made it happen.
Yeah, I've been in that same boat driving too, where it's like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Everything shuts down. You just keep going. And like even you get like that when we went to Disneyland. You didn't use the bathroom the whole time. We are there for the whole damn day. You're just like, we gotta get to this ride. We gotta get to this ride. We gotta get to this ride.
Yep.
Yeah. Fucking yeah. So yes, it overrides all of my human needs and instincts, and so but that becomes a weapon against myself, right? So like you're talking about with these short spurts, they work in short spurts, but as I've found in not so long ago, if I do get myself to those stress levels where the resolution cannot be fixed by me, or the problem cannot be solved by me and it's in somebody else's hands, that's when I'm on the darker side of the psychotech, because it's like you can't complete the loop. You're just spinning your wheels over and over again.
Yeah, that's where you have to kind of you have to get yourself almost to like a hard reset state.
Yeah.
Where you have to somehow find the way to take back that control from that other external force,
Yeah.
And that can come with drastic measures too. If you have to know what you're doing, that's the weird thing, and that's the hard part with sort of like these darker psychotechs when it comes to pharmaceuticals, especially. Right? Going through university, that's where I picked up smoking cigarettes because I had to stay up late. I had to, that's where I picked up probably a whole bunch of caffeine abuse that. Throughout life, like you have to try to balance with not getting kidney stones or things like that. It just becomes a real like teetering thing. And when it gets to illicit substances, because they're unregulated, it becomes a lot more difficult to keep that balance for any long sort of time without having significant long-term damage.
Yeah. And I think it quickly approaches the point where it's like you're what is it? What's the line? It's like you're paying for today's joy with tomorrow, something like that. And I do think that there is that balance there, because it can too easily be that you're robbing yourself of tomorrow's joy to sort of pay today.
Yeah. And then like, or a couple days joy, and and like I said, I've been a fan of stimulants to get things done, and there's times where you have to find ways to take days off just to recover again, because this is where it gets weird when you sort of use this stuff. Is there's a sort of social stigma that gets attached to it, where it's like you have to find, even though people do it, even though it's the basic example is when you have too much to drink the night before you have to go into work, so you call in sick, or you can't go to work, so you call in sick. You don't say that you're drunk, right? Or you don't say that you're hungover.
Right.
You're like, oh God, I got a cold.
Food poisoning.
Yeah, food poisoning is the best one. Nowadays, actually, it's COVID. COVID is the proper one.
Yes, that's right. That still works, which is nice.
It works everywhere from the highest corporate level. Oh, why isn't any of this work done? COVID.
COVID.
COVID got us all. Or food poisoning.
Terrible.
But the funny thing is, like, everybody has gone through that phase where anybody who's drank anything has gone through that day, that night where they drank too much and woke up like, oh shit, I can't go to work today, or I had to go to work drunk, or I had to go to work hungover. But there's just that social contract doesn't allow us to say anything.
Right. Well, yeah, and it's about payoffs too. And I think Corey says here he was watching the JRE with George St. Pierre, former UFC champion, talking about newer substances increasing reaction times these days in sports. It seems like serious brain short circuiting decrease reaction times. But then he said the long-term effects are probably pretty serious with stuff they're using these days. And that gets back to what I think we're talking about with trade-offs, right? So it's like you can utilize these. I don't want to call them shortcuts because that's not really what they are. They're sort of like garden paths almost, where it can get you to A to B, but you have to be I think you have to be aware of what the cost might be after the fact. And if the trade-off is good, then you make that trade-off and everything is okay. But right, the balancing act, that's where the ambiguity lies.
Yeah, and definitely with like some like reaction times. Like you know, it's great to have shorter reaction times in a fight. You need that. Might not be so good if you're in an argument with your significant other.
Right.
Where maybe the best thing would be to take a step back and think about something that happened, but no, instead you just attack. You engage.
Clock them.
Yeah. Proper
Just
right.
immediately. Hey, honey, pow. Sorry, babe. It's these reaction time.
Yeah, I
drugs that got me on.
It's like it's the adrenaline.
I feel like Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man. I'm just seeing the flying in slow motion, fist coming at me.
This is going back to adrenaline too. That's one of like the heavier ones. Like like I've been shot at, and there's this weird adrenaline dump that you get when you get out of that situation where you kind of want to do it again. You kind of want to go back and avoid getting shot at again just for that adrenaline dump. You're like, it can become this weird addictive loop. And I can't even imagine for, say, like a soldier or something like that who can fire back. You know, and they fire back and then they get their kill. If for some of them that adrenaline dump just is that thing, that sort of drug that they search for. They search for the next firefight. You know, they want to get back into that feeling. And that can be very dangerous.
You know, it kind of reminds me of adrenaline. That is, it's almost like if you could pause a movie, or like you guys have seen Big Fish. You know the scene where he's in the circus and he sees the girl, and everything slows down, and he's like, you know, she's all in slow motion and everything's in slow motion. And he's like, what they don't tell you about, you know, like slow motion is that, you know, everything has to catch up again and starts going in fast motion. It feels like adrenaline is like that sometimes, where it's like you can slow down, you know, the reaction times, or speed up your reaction times, or utilize that adrenaline. But it's impressive the way everything comes crashing back at you. And I think that while you're talking about soldiers, as I could see where that would be extremely damaging, because once the adrenaline is over, you have to deal with the emotional response. And I find that the emotional response is always, usually for me, and I've never been at war, so I wouldn't know how deep that is, but the emotional response for me is usually quite surprising. How much it takes a toll on you. Yeah,
of course. Or even getting back into going into like slower times, right? Like in war, everything's happening. Well, I've never been in war, but from what I heard, everything happens really quick, right? It's extremely fast. And one of those challenges is that when you get back home, everything just goes so slow. You know, it's the same thing that you're talking about. Like even if things are going quick and they're slow motion for you, now things are even going slower, and you get this weird offset of time dilation experience where things just don't feel right, and then the emotional response too can take a heavy toll on you.
And it's also almost like emotional halting. Like you press the pause button on your sort of reasoning system and emotional system, you execute your task, but you still have to feel all of those things. So it's just like you're putting them on hold until the task is done, and then all of a sudden it hits you like a ton of bricks.
Yeah, but you're getting closer now to talking about one of my other favorite drugs, love. Love is one of the heavy drugs. Makes you do a lot of stupid shit. But yeah, no, it's the same thing though, right? Like you pause your whole life when you're sort of fall into that love state. And you kind of get high off of that drug, and then all of a sudden you got to deal with the emotional response if things go sideways. You know? And even when things don't, when things go perfectly, right? There's still some sort of withdrawal effect from the initial taking of the love drug, right? It's not like she's going to be moving in slow-mo forever. That's just not how reality works. It's just for that very short dopamine hit, or the short complex chemical hit that hits your brain. Then after that, life still has to happen, and you have to manage those waters, which can be difficult.
I'd co-sign that. I know it for sure. I've always had that moment where, like, I don't know if I'm alone in this, but it's like if you're crushing on somebody and then you finally find out that they return the feelings, and then all of a sudden you're like, uh-oh, what did I just do? Oh no. And then there's like this immediate like recoil, because love is a like really intense emotion, and I think it can be, you can love a person and you can love the idea of love, and I think it's really easy to confuse those two. So you got to take it, at least for me, I'm always like, wait, what's going on? What was the motivation there, you know?
Yeah. My problem is I've always been like pedal to the metal when it comes to like full of like if I know the way I feel. The thing is like I'm like when it comes to that stuff, it's like let's not dick around. It's either it's gonna work or it's not gonna work. So like let's not fool around. The shorter that we can have the little bullshitting period, the better. Let's figure out what the fuck's going on here and let's try to take the path. But yeah, pedal to the metal.
Well, yeah, and I think that you also have to be sort of
so many jokes.
I think you also have to be sort of aware that if that is your predilection, is that, you know, the concept of the weaponization of love as well, because love certainly can be a weapon.
Oh, let's not get into honeypox, right?
Oh, like, well, yeah, right. Of course. But you know, like if you're somebody who does fall fast and hard, you know, like that's you know, that's a romantic trait. That's somebody who wants to, you know, have love and experience it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think that there are people who recognize that and then sort of weaponize the concept of love in order to get something they want.
Sure. Of course. Again, it becomes like this fine balancing game, right? But when it comes to that, I mean, even with all other sort of pharmacological, like I've always been a Russian type person, like the Bulls Russian, but I guess that's not a romantic, that's more like a character trait. Sort of thing, but it's always been sort of like the fly fast crash. There's a certain programming principle that goes along this thing where basically just rush in, just go in. If it fails, and it fails and it crashes, and then you deal with the crash. That sort of philosophy. And I don't know. It might be a good thing. Like if you go slow, do you want to waste all those years? Right? Like it's the same thing with even like drug use. Do you want to be an addict for like 30 years of your life, or do you want to overdose in 3 days? That sort of mentality, right? Like those 30 years may be hell. But if you did it in 3 days, then at least it's done and it's over, sort of thing. Or do you want to?
No, you could just do 30 years of drugs in 3 days and then call it even.
There you go.
Just get your fill. Corey says it's going to, in regards to relationships, it's going to be a readjustment ratio between the initial fantasy and the reality of life for everyone. And it can very easily lead to a betrayal response that the reality wasn't the same as the fantasy. You just got to be aware of the betrayal impulse. Yes. And interesting that, you know, betrayal can even be felt when there is no sort of overt action. It's this idea that you constructed that doesn't actually fall in line with who the person is or what the relationship was. So in effect, you can almost betray yourself quite easily.
Yeah, there's we might want to do an episode on love one day, but there's a bunch of philosophers that spoke about the different kinds of love, like the difference between a crush and a marriage, for example, like falling in love with the idea of somebody versus the actual human, and what you have to go through those realities. But that kind of gets back to that weird hologram thing, right? Where you have your own hologram. Or once a paid segment of the CIA. We are not sponsored by any government agencies.
That we know of.
Right? You have that hologram of yourself, of that person. It's the crush phase, it's the overall romantic phase. Then as you go out over time, you kind of merge your holograms together into one. Ideally, right? And that whole betrayal thing is when, you know, through any sort of psychological damage, what have you, or action from the other person where it starts to skip back into this direction,
Hmm.
and then
Yeah.
and then the realities become like this in the worst case.
Yeah, definitely incompatible reality versus expectations, sort of thing, for sure. Which also, like yeah, it's interesting how we can sort of construct things that end up being pitfalls for ourselves, and sometimes we even like we willingly do so. I think like you guys are saying in relation to a crush, you don't really know the person, but you've constructed something almost as like an ideal, um, which is ultimately really setting yourself up to be disappointed because I don't know if anybody can live up to the perfect ideal. So
I would.
Well, one person did. Sorry.
oh,
Oh, okay.
Wow.
That's it. I'm sorry. I had to.
Look how she brags about herself.
Oh. All right, now I'm gonna leave now. I'll let you two finish off the episode. I'm going to vomit in the fucking other room.
Our psychotech has been effective. We've rendered Mike useless.
It's super effective. No, but the other way you could treat this though too is as another substance to use within industry, right? It's if you have a crush on somebody, if you can keep it to that state where you don't have to learn so much about that person. If that's getting you by on the day to day, and you understand exactly what it means to have a crush, right? You use it as the same way that the trucker uses the B12 or the speed.
Got him.
You use it the same way that the engineer uses the powdery substance to finish their job, or you use it the same way as that. You can still utilize that, and it can be a utilitarian tool.
Yes, but then we get into the ethics, right? Because the ethics of that type of action can get murky very quickly. There's a difference between maybe entertaining the thought of somebody and then sort of leading them astray. Like
sure,
that
comes down to interaction, though, right? Like
how much, absolutely.
And who is initiating the interaction? Are you the one who's actively seeking out the other person to get another hit off of them?
Mm-hmm.
Or are they the ones seeking you for whatever reason? And it's sort of a natural byproduct of the interpersonal relationship.
Yes, definitely. Motive, intention is always important.
Yeah, when it comes down to, I hate to say using somebody, but it's exactly what you're doing. Using somebody as a drug, that's what it has to come down to. And like it's unknown whether, like, for example, with honeypots, right? When somebody else is trying to influence you for their own decisions, whether it be corporate, foreign government, or you can even argue their own intentions, right? Trying to bend you to their will so that you don't have a shared life. In this case, in the ethics of relationships, but have a shared life. You're a tool for their life. I don't know if it's okay to kind of dip your hand and use that honey as a drug to propel you forward. Like if they're trying to use you, then is it good for you to use them? You know what I mean? One is an active part of life. The other one is just more of a drug use.
Yeah, and I think that's where you get into sort of parasocial relationships, right? Or what is it called? Codependent relationships. Sorry. Where both people are sort of using each other and doing it willingly, even to their detriment sometimes. So yeah, there can be situations in which two people engage in an exchange that will eventually hurt both of them, but they do it for that short-term immediate hit, that dopamine fix, just like the person that might utilize substances to get a project done, but then may continue to use those substances when the project is over.
Yeah, suffers from long-term addiction. But addiction comes down to a different thing too, right? You have a psychological component and a biological component to addiction. Biological ones, depending on the person, might be harder. I've always felt like I always felt like psychological pain is worse than biological pain, but I think love might be a very specific type of drug where if you have these two people sort of like orbiting each other and they're using each other, and that's like that could be the basis of a very strong relationship if they understand what's happening at the beginning and how it can project forward. I don't think it necessarily is always harmful for relationships to start out in that sort of codependent sense. It's like a binary star system or a two black hole system, right? Binary black hole system.
A binary, yes.
They found
not?
black holes that orbit around each other.
Yes, and then smash into each other and destroy everything.
Yes, that's what it's all about. Destruction and chaos.
Yeah.
I really love this sort of like techie abstraction of love. It's like really adorable.
And these are things I think about deep down. All right.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
So Corey asks, so is it a iterable reciprocal game or is it real for someone and is someone lying? You can only know for yourself, but you can always explore whether or not you're lying. Yeah. And so I guess, right, knowledge of the other minds and the importance of earnesty, right? So, like there is that's where we tie into that moral thing, right? Whether it is moral to use somebody. But, like if you're asking yourself and doing something in earnest and, earnesty can come from a place of, utility as well. But yeah, I think you can really only know your own motivations for sure.
Yeah, now we're getting to game theory, right? With respect to love, sort of like prisoner's dilemma. I don't know if prisoner's dilemma would be the proper one to use here. If like you had a mediator and you sat two people who supposedly loved each other, you asked them if you really love each other, you set up the stakes and you set the thought experiment the same way you would set it up in a prisoner's dilemma. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, now we're getting down to like game theory of love or game theory of that romantic feeling. Right? And it takes a little bit more of a abstracted mind to look at things in that way because love is such a heavy drug that it usually takes over the person completely, where they want the other person to reciprocate, where it's not, there's no room whether or not the other person's lying. I feel like
it's interesting that you bring love into the equation too, because I don't even know, like, would you consider love an altered state? And if it's altered, what is it altered to? What isn't an alternative from?
It's alternative from your natural sort of single state. So there's thing with I think we've talked about this before many moons ago, where as a man you sort of, if you're single and you're doing your thing, you kind of get setting your way, you're fine. You're not actively looking for somebody else. You're just doing your job, doing your hobbies, doing whatever you have to do. You're kind of good. So that could be the baseline, right? Same thing with women. I only know it from a man's perspective because I have an Audi and not an innie. And so as you're fine, that's good. And then you run into somebody that messes all that up. You're willing to do sacrifice, like you're willing to sacrifice yourself. You're willing to do something extremely stupid for the other person. There is a flip side to this love coin too, called hate. Love and hate are the same exact thing, in my opinion, where you're willing to do something very stupid for the other person. You're willing to sacrifice your own life to make sure that other person doesn't get the thing that they want. You're willing to go to war. You're willing to, go on a crusade or what have you. Same exact emotion though, but your baseline is kind of whatever it is you do in your day to day without seeking somebody out or without willing to sacrifice yourself for another person.
Yeah, I think I just find it notable because love would be I think that love would be the one state that most of us would be happy to be permanently in.
I would be very happy to be high all the time. Let me tell you.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. You'd have to do a longitudinal study about that. Get high all the time, every day, and then we can find out. But I mean, like I would say that in the way that we idealize or conceptualize the ideal, love is a part of that most of the time. I don't know if getting high is. So I just find it like notable to think that it could be the altered state that we want to be in the most. You know,
Where
and
we shift it over to where that becomes the baseline,
right?
Like where I'm saying getting high every day, that stone state is the baseline,
right? Yeah,
I got you. Yeah, no, it is very nice. It might be pushed too by biological imperatives, right?
Mm-hmm.
The biological addiction to procreate. Let's get really cold and like cut about it, right?
To fornicate under consent of the king.
Yes. To love implies that you're going to have a baby.
Yeah.
That forces your genes forward. So there might be some sort of biological imperative to get into this altered state of love so that you can continue to make babies.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Definitely.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like there's nothing,
No.
But these other substances, it might not be such a biological imperative to push yourself into that state. But you look at other animals too. There's tons of animals that get high on stuff, right? I think dolphins and pufferfish or something like that. So there still might be some latent biological imperatives to do that from an evolutionary basis. I'm not an evolutionary biologist. I'm really curious to know what they would think about it. But
if I were God, I would put myself in the mind of a dolphin just to see what happens when I poke myself with a pufferfish. I need to know what's going on in their heads when they do that. Like that's insane.
Like why? Like why are you doing it?
Yeah. Like you can't say like the walls are melting. You're in the water. You know, like what's going on here? Corey says, of course it's irrational. You'll be vulnerable, but the world is just a better place if they love you back, right? Yeah. And maybe that's part of it too, is like, you know, the reciprocity of love is very important.
Ooh, but that's from your point of view, right? Was the world better with Bonnie and Clyde? Well, should Bonnie and Clyde exist?
Well, I mean, it is a love story.
There's a lot of dead people though.
Same thing in Romeo and Juliet, man. I mean, every love story has a ton of death in it.
Yeah,
I watched that movie, the Baz Luhrmann adaptation, and the scene of Mercutio where he's like a curse on both your houses. Like I felt that because he was just trying to help his friend out. He had nothing to do with this whole situation, and he got and like. Screw that, man. Screw you. Both your houses.
Just 2 hours of sustained misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Shakespeare was such a troll, man. Oh my God. Corey says, so maybe hope that the world is better that way is necessary for life to overcome the whole cold, hard reality of entropy, because that's the paradox. Should we not evolve into more complex forms? Well, you know, this podcast has been a conversation about that very question, I think, because I think we recognize the inevitability for us to evolve into more complex forms, but what are we losing along the way? Yeah.
And just getting back to that dolphin comment being like,
yes.
I've taken some administration justice classes because for a while I wanted to be Batman, you know, and one of them was taught by a former city chief of police. We were going over drugs, and he was talking about what to do if you're a cop and you're off duty and you see somebody doing some drugs. He was like, when you're off duty, don't do anything like that. And he was like, you know, he's like, I've ran into a lot of stories as a beat cop where like a lot of 80s crack epidemic type things. It's like when I'm 80 years old, I'm just gonna try it. I'm just gonna do it. So I'm at the age where I'm old enough, and I just want to know what it's like. And just the overall curiosity, and I think that's what that sort of this darker psychotypical pharmaceuticals get down to, is there's a weird curiosity we have about it, but the things in life may stop us or usually stop us from doing it. But there's always this weird base curiosity as we build up this mythology around the actual pharmacological thing itself, right? The pufferfish to the dolphin, the crack to the cop, whatever it is. There's always this
Hunter
weird
S. Thompson's daily menu.
Jesus, all that alcohol. What are you kidding?
There's so much. Jeez Louise, he would have like 5/5 of alcohol a day.
Oh, God.
By breakfast.
By breakfast, yeah.
And then that goes back to like even I think the people that all got high on love, like the Rasputins. Right? I would argue that that dude was addicted to some form of love or some sort, even if it was just lust.
Rasputin had a gigantic penis.
That's
Literally, that he had such a big penis that when he died, they stole his penis. I swear to you, they stole Rasputin's penis.
Okay, I could be misremembering, but I heard that there was a statue somewhere. It was like a memorial, so it's a tomb, and there's a statue of the person on the tomb, and apparently people will ride the statue.
No, I don't think
in
that's
order
Rasputin,
to gain
but...
good luck. But I don't know if it's that statue. It's some statue.
Rasputin had a gigantic hog, and he convinced all the women in Russia that he could heal them with his dick, and he did.
Jesus.
So, there you go.
Well, dude, but you know what though? That was a thing because I also heard that there were like doctors who would cure women.
Hysteria.
Yes, they would cure women of hysteria by giving them an orgasm. And I was like, whoa, that was like a whole thing. Yes, sir. Let me get, 2 for today. Like
arguably now the cure for incels is an orgasm.
Boy, I'm so glad we've evolved so women don't have to go to the doctor to get an orgasm. You can just do it themselves. DIY is much better.
How was your trip to the doctor today?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
But now we've become so evolved, though. Now that we might have to send poor youth males that are like of age, send them to brothels so that they can get laid, so they don't fucking.
Oh man.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, it's just gone in the other direction. Now we have to cure the hysterical males.
Time is a flat circle.
Time is a flat circle.
But I like this concept of hysterical males.
Yeah. It's true.
When you were talking about the proximity of love and hate, I just wanted to add the idea of obsession, right? Because I think about ladybugs, if you have a couple, they're cute, but if they're all over you, that's kind of freaky. Always have, hate to break it to you. Wait, Corey, what did he say? Always have, hate to break it to you. What are we breaking to who? I need another comment.
Probably something we said just a second ago. There's a bit of a delay.
Okay, I'll wait.
You're reading comments?
I am reading comments.
It's a live streamer thing.
He's got good comments. I like Corey's comments. But no, I was just thinking about this idea of obsession, and it's part of fixation, it's part of attention, and with Psychotech, the dialing up and the dialing down of your focus seems to be something that's sort of like part of the conversation. Whatever you're putting energy and attention toward, you're sort of going to magnify that to a disproportionate state. Okay. Corey clarified. Got it. Yeah. Got it.
We've always sent hysterical males to brothels. Yeah. That is true. Yeah. Think about, the sailors coming off of their ships,
Fleet Week.
Yep.
So any soldier pretty much in any
soldier boy.
No, I do agree. There is like an overwhelming thing that comes with this obsession, but that's like the love drug, right? Like I told you, I can be where I am, like full gas on the pedal. We're getting this done real quick, and that's because in a weird way, if somebody is not okay with me putting that much focus on the other person, then I want them to mislabel it as obsession so I can start to move on. but it can become a thing where this obsession thing is unwanted. But now you're traveling. It's like it is the addicted form of love, I would argue.
But you just made a case for it to be like a sort of like a strategic repellent.
For sure.
Which works. Yeah.
No,
works.
if you're not like on the real, if you're not ready to go 100, I'm not gonna play games with you.
Yeah.
Like if you don't want it, then get out of here. Keep moving, kid. But if you're willing to handle it, then you can start to open up like the world to that thing. And it's the same thing where like we get this weird thing in dating where you try to be the best you can on the first couple of dates, but then you start to have to show these little your little quirks. Like nobody's perfect, but you have to start to show your little darknesses, I guess. And it's like, let's just move all that to the front. Let's flip it, move all that shit to the front. You're okay with all the darkness, then we can move on, move forward. So let's make it a repellent, but I don't know. I'm still forming ideas about it, but it's that same thing.
I call that the talk.
I don't know if the first date's going to be fun, but yeah, I get you.
I'm so bad at dating, so don't take
your
it.
Deepest, darkest secrets.
Yeah. Have you told somebody?
What are you most ashamed of?
Oh my gosh. No, but I do like that idea though of having that sort of openness, because part and parcel with what I was saying earlier about how if there's reciprocation, I immediately recoil a little bit. That is this like conversation where it's like, are you sure? Because let me just lay out all the flaws, and like I know I've done that at least twice, and it's pretty funny, You just kind of, I don't know. Yeah, you don't want to waste anybody's time. Maybe, So there's this desire to sort of like take the specialness away as fast as you can.
We've talked about this before, but the fork in the road with the garden path, and then the unpaved path, right? It's like you have two options. You can go to the right where the path is pristine and it's a meadow, but at the end of it is a hellscape that kills you, or you can go through the dark forest of scary things, and at the end you'll be in a idyllic paradise. So you're sort of front loading the hard stuff. Yeah. And that's a strategy for sure. It's a strategy, and it works. The hit rate is probably very low, but the success of the hit is probably very high.
Sure. And then coming again, being more of coming from a male point of view, that our sort of our worth is still tied into providing, right? And I know we've kind of got off the topic of and I guess it still works with Psychotech, fuck it. That front loading comes a thing of like, I can provide a lot for an individual. I'm within a certain strata of I've been very lucky, like worked my way from the bottom 5% of earning up into like the top 10%. Right? It's very good, great skill. I don't like, you have to front load all that dark stuff in order to figure out who really wants you for you, or who's gonna just stick around for the money. Mm-hmm. Right. And as a male, that's our worth, or that's our social dating worth, is the money that we can provide for the household. I'll give a shit what anybody else says. You can bring up all the romantic notions of, oh, it's love, it's great, things like that. You still got to pay for something, right? No woman's going to want to date you if you can't fucking buy a movie ticket or something, or can't get yourself to the date. Like if you're like, hey, unless you're like 18 or 19 years old, like teenage love, it's different. Yeah. But as a proper adult, as a male, you have to provide.
Yes.
There was a comedian about this. It was like dating. I don't know who. I think it was Chris Rock was doing a stand-up bit, and he talked about the difference between dating women in different age groups. And he said he had some woman ask him to like fix her roof. like he's like, 20-year-olds will ask you to buy a pair of shoes, but like these older chicks, they're like, can you help me with my mortgage payment? I was like, whoa, all right.
Hey, we better be moving in. We better be again full gas pedal, right? Like,
well, and then I had a laugh.
I'm moving in,
dude. And then this female comic was giving like a response to it, and she was just like, he's not wrong. Mortgages suck. And she was like, your house is always falling apart. I was like, oh, dang.
Why do you think I rent?
Right.
There's a thank you for smoking. There's this thing where the uppity Nuremberg defense that most of the problems caused within the civilized world is because we quote unquote do it for the mortgage. Like we lack empathy because we have to pay a mortgage. And like it's pretty funny though. But yeah, no, like without all the nuances of the stuff, these pharmaceuticals can be pretty heavy, even from the most socially acceptable, such as love, as we've been on this long track on, or the most socially unacceptable. But I feel like as long as you get the project done, even the project is life, right? I've used certain drugs to just break through psychological traumas so that I can either like metaphorically shut the door or cauterize the wound, not put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound or something like that. I've done those things in order just to shut that part off and forget all about it. And it can be effective, but again, it's that balancing act, right? How do you go about it where it doesn't become a long-term problem? You know?
Yes. And how are you sure that you're actually ridding yourself of the thing that you're trying to? Because like this is the this is the problem, right? Because we could look at these things as sort of tools to help us accomplish a goal, but there is a case to be made that they are shortcuts, and there's nothing wrong with a shortcut. I'm not trying to poo-poo that, but it does. I wonder if there is also a trade-off in the catharsis that doing things without those shortcuts would provide. So, utilizing some sort of mind expanding substance to get over a trauma is, I believe, well and good. And it's, we're seeing more science about this actually working for a lot of people. But I think it needs to be mixed in with a healthy amount of do-it-yourselfness, so that you don't feel like you've been robbed of the process. Because I think subconsciously you might feel robbed of the process if you just took a pill and felt better.
Yeah, of course. That's the SSRI, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where you have to get down to, like, all this stuff are just sort of supplements through. It should be complementary with a psychological reflection and introversion. I think we spend too much time trying to be social. Social media makes it so easy that you could be alone and still, post stuff on the internet. But you have to spend some time with yourself and really, like, what is catharsis to you, right? If somebody did you wrong, is catharsis the thing where you talk to that other person? And then, this sort of psychotech, this dark psychotech that we're talking about may not be the best thing, because at the end of the day, you still have to talk to that person. Or do you have to sit beside yourself and talk to yourself? In which case, this mind expanding or constricting substances, these are mind constricting substances, which can be good or bad, depending for me, it's always helped to focus in on one certain task. Like, my mind has a wide breadth, scattered brain would be the proper term. So sometimes it's good to focus on one path and prune out all the others, and then head down that path. Is that catharsis set within you? And this sort of stuff can help you figure that out. But again, abuse is always a problem with this sort of stuff. And it's up to you as the individual to kind of sort that stuff out with yourself.
Yes. And I think most people that would probably utilize mind altering substance in a therapeutic sense, not necessarily in the abusive sense. I think I lost it.
No, it's my only counterpoint to that was going to be something like Munchausen or Munchausen by proxy, where you go out and seek out doctors abusively, right? You go out and try to do whatever. Yeah, the same thing can be with therapy, right? You can abuse therapy. You can. Stuff becomes weirdly again, on the fringes of thought, right? There's no research on
Mm-hmm.
any of this. There is it's all very academic, and whether this drug uses help this sort of element or something like that, but not really directing in what approach.
So I wonder, maybe, are we not trading one suffering for another? Because it would seem to me that, in not every case, obviously, but it would seem to me that there are some cases in which somebody might be trying to escape from a set of suffering only to find themselves thrust into a new set of suffering. And if that is the case, is that as good as sort of removing the prior suffering?
Trading problem sets. That's like something you have to ask yourself. And I mean, from a Buddhist standpoint, all life is suffering, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're always going to be trading these sets of sufferings. It's just, what do you want to suffer more in, right? Do you want to be stoned all the time and have to deal with like not really being able to focus or having to motivate yourself to like do a thing, which is probably conditioned by multiple decades of state sponsored and tobacco sponsored propaganda, despite marijuana? Or do you want to deal with the problem set of whatever sobriety brings?
Right, or the problem set of the thing that made you use marijuana as the coping mechanism.
But we don't. The thing is, like, we don't ask it about caffeine, though. What was the thing that made you use caffeine as a coping?
Sleepiness.
Well, maybe you should sleep more.
You don't drink. Yeah, absolutely. I sleep more, and I'm still tired in the morning because it's a habitual thing. Yeah.
Right. Like, what's the source of the problem of the sleepiness? Why do you stay awake up so long? What's on your mind? What's happening?
Like these capitalist society, man. No,
yeah.
Oh god, capitalism. Yes. I'm going to the. Have you ever played Red Alert 1 or 2? I think it's Red Alert 1. Where
no, I haven't.
My boon is in. Oh, that's embarrassing. Don't look at that. Don't.
Oh no.
There we go. There we go.
Boom shot.
Oh god. Going to cinema hell now.
Yes.
I'm gonna have to make Michael Bay movies for the rest of my life.
Uh-huh.
No. Cause I lost it. Never mind. Doesn't matter. It's a joke.
That's right. Yeah, we're good.
All right. I do like this idea of like, what is it like? By removing the suffering, are you missing the point or the lesson or stifling growth or something like that? And I only mentioned that because like, you know what? I won't share that story. I will only say that, well, sorry, I don't want to bring up my knee injury again, but I have a lot of like examples based off of that. So
I think it might just be dependent on the level of suffering, right? And again, we go back to the trade-off. Which level of suffering is more tolerable? And for some people, the original thing is much worse than the coping mechanism or the effects that the coping mechanism might have. So, the trade-off is justified.
Sure. One can argue that it's an external mind eraser, which your brain does automatically with traumatic experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can, it's the supplement for the actual thing, maybe. No. We're going to move on to one other one, and it's going to be much shorter, I feel like, but I feel like it's time to move on from this.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, we go at this for hours, I feel like. It is a rather interesting subject, especially when you start throwing in love, hate, emotions, all of that stuff. Any last comments on this pharmacological psychotech? Do you think it's like just a natural part of our existence? Do you think? I don't know. What do you think?
Dolphins are getting stoned. So
I think
anyone
listening should rewatch the Thoth episode because, like those dolphins, Nick had used the word curiosity, and I think curiosity is cozy up to the acquisition of knowledge and experience. And, I mean, in Latin, there's a priori and a posteriori knowledge, right? That's knowledge that you sort of know before you experience something, and then stuff that you know after you've experienced it. And because of this knowledge of other minds, somebody can tell you that if you walk to this mountaintop and drink this potion, that you're going to experience X, Y, or Z, but you don't have to, because I brought the lesson back to you, right? That very like
Zarathustra.
Joseph Campbell, yeah, and or Joseph Campbell, where you're bringing boons back from the journey that you just took. And yeah, sometimes it's good to hear that from another person, but other times the curiosity, they have to know it for themselves.
Definitely. Yeah. Corey's got an idea. A sensible way is the old way. Your family and your friends and your community make the romantic choices, because individual kids driven by hormones can't make good choices. Romeo and Juliet again. I don't think that people remember the end of that story often enough. Yes.
Fair enough.
Yeah, use a better mail carrier.
Yeah, for real.
That's fair enough. Yeah, no,
yeah, people still do use the arranged marriage system. That still happens. Community definitely plays a part in coupling still. Yeah.
And even just the idea of having like a small community that you're a part of, that sort of connection, from a research standpoint, actually does have a lot of benefits. Besides the obvious, I mean, it's obviously great to be a part of a community, and
don't just tell the friar your plan. Tell somebody else too. Jeez.
Yeah.
Tell the chaplain.
Yeah, tell somebody else. That poor friar.
Your wife. Maybe don't act rashly. Gosh, in the Baz Luhrmann too. She's opening her eyes as he's like crying,
like he already drank the poison. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I'm just like, golly, just 1 second, man. Like, recite a sonnet, and you would have had just enough time.
If only he was much more like Rasputin and lived through the poison.
Yes.
Yeah, no. I think there's a bunch of interesting points that have been brought up here, but we've lost I think we've lost a little bit of shamanic tradition, where there has to be somebody who goes out into the desert and goes up to the mountain and brings those lessons back, right? There has to be some human then that does that for the others, and the ones that are interested within that curiosity might be more inclined towards the shamanic class, which is where you can slowly initiate them, or do the thing where you just, like the way that you learned how to swim, where your dad just threw you into the lake and said good luck, and either you learn how to swim or you don't.
That was really traumatic for me, actually. My dad used to do that to me, legit.
Yeah, part of
me into the deep end when I was like 3 years old, over and over and over again, like for hours.
Hey, you'll learn one way or another.
I mean, I was a shit swimmer, and I'm still a shit swimmer, so it didn't work that well.
There's always some way, though. But yeah, that shamanic class that dives into sort of like the taboo, and as long as they know what they're doing, like a proper shamanic class. I think we've lost that within Western culture.
I think it's just been redirected to celebrity and social media and stuff like that, because we still have the shaman. It's just in the form of the pickup artist or the self-help guru or the neuroscientist. It's all these people, these personalities that that we look for guidance from. I just don't think that it has these the same level of risk that the shaman has to take. I think now we've, like you could be a shaman for nothing now. At least before, it took a incredibly dangerous journey for you to bring some sort of knowledge back.
Ain't no shaman I know ever make videos. The shamans I know, you got to go to them. You got to go find them.
Right.
They're not advertising themselves anywhere.
Yeah. And I do think that like that materialism comes into play too, as a sort of litmus test, because it's like, when you see a spiritual or religious figure roll up in a Rolls Royce, it hits different than someone who, like has the more modest aesthetic lifestyle. And I don't know why that is, I mean, I don't think you have to be impoverished in order to be a shaman,
But
but
it depends on what you're looking for that shamanism for, because if it's
I guess you're right.
somebody that's like successful and it's all about, hey, I'm going to teach you how to become a big baller and make $1 million and have all the ladies, then you want the guy driving nice cars and having a nice house and being flashy.
That's not a shaman, that's a sophist.
Well, okay, so but my point was that shamanism is no longer here, but the human need to idolize shaman is still here. So whether it is a real shaman or not is not really relevant, because we still need to look to the shaman. So we're just looking at people, online now.
Getting like teachers.
Getting back to that idea of like of love, as we were saying, that the notion of love, or the idea of the person versus the actual person. We're in love with the idea of the shaman. We're not in love with the actual shaman.
Yeah, absolutely. Or what the shaman might be able to do for us. And that's really what it comes down to, I think, because, what do you think about like a shaman nowadays? I would think, if I wanted to see an actual hardcore shaman, where would I have to go? Maybe down to South America, maybe to a native tribe, maybe somewhere in Africa.
Yeah,
I'm not going,
dude. Shit.
Okay, well,
no, I'm sorry.
I was trying to be inclusive of other cultures, Ailey.
Yeah.
I was just saying, but if you wanted to see a shaman, I got you covered.
Within Western culture, though, the shaman, I feel like, is equivalent to the philosopher. So the sophist is sort of like that idea. The sophist being like, give me some money or follow the things that I do and you will be rich. Versus the philosopher who's like, here's a set of ideas I will teach you. I will talk to you.
Is a shaman not capable of corruption, in your view?
So, yes, but it doesn't become a shaman anymore when it's corrupted.
Okay, so then no. So a shaman is an uncorruptible entity. Because if it becomes corrupted, it's not a shaman.
It becomes something different, then yes.
Right. So, I mean, I think that's where we're having a disconnect, because I don't think that, I don't consider people like Andrew Tate a shaman, but I'm saying that he is effectively one because people follow him like one. And I think that's kind of where my thing is. Now, if we're talking about an ideal, then yeah, I'd be very hard pressed to find somebody that would fit those shoes for sure.
I got you.
I don't think.
That's a fair argument. Definitely within that case, I would use the words more like philosopher and sophist. Right? I would call it. Again,
was Rasputin a shaman? Yes, he was, and he had a giant dick.
He was doing that dick magic.
Yes. The original anti-hysterics.
Yes, exactly.
But no, Andrew Tate would be a sophist.
Yes.
And then you would have to dig a little bit deeper to find your westernized philosopher or your Western shaman, which is a philosopher, like within our culture.
Yeah, I think again, I would be very remiss. I would be at a loss to think of anybody who would be considered that. And I mean, philosopher is different than shaman too, right? I mean, because we're thinking about quasi-religious practices as well. It's not just
what about the mystery schools? What about the sort of the drug use, sort of like the extreme practices of some of the philosophers took in ancient Greece?
Yeah. I mean, at that point, you can talk about like the Eleusinian schools and stuff, but then you can also just say then Burning Man is just a whole bunch of shaman, because they're all talking about ideas and taking peyote. I mean, I don't know.
But they paid money to get into Burning Man, right?
Okay.
They paid money to do that. And that's a little bit different than what we're trying. There's not set education systems that like the philosophers set up. There are. You're right, where the waters get very muddled, where you would have to like set up like the attributes of both and try to connect them together and then try to find a common source. I'm not saying you're not wrong, but I don't think it's as simple as saying that Burning Man is full of shamans. You can argue that Burning Man is full of sophists or people who want to be shamans but are not shamans. But if you plucked one of them and let them do a bunch of peyote for free, like gather it naturally or what have you, and walk in the desert and try to have a vision quest, now you're getting a little bit closer to the idea, but it has to be set in some sort of religious practice, whether that be founded or unfounded yet. And that gets into the argument of religious practices and what it means to be religious.
Right.
Like, I think it's a different argument.
Okay, well, I don't think you can separate the shaman from the religion. So I would say that we wouldn't be able to find them in philosophers either.
Philosophers have religion; they just don't talk about it.
Then they're not practicing shamanism.
They still are.
It's integrated. Anyways, Ayla, what's your question? Go ahead.
Well, I wonder if this conversation is sort of like the difference between the interpretation of artwork as viewed by the artist versus the audience. You know what I mean? Because, like, is a shaman because he or she or they are a shaman intrinsically, or is it because others view them as such, exalt them to that level, review, you know what I mean? Like, and that gets again into sort of that knowledge of other minds, but it's also like the truth of a thing, the qualia of a thing. Is it intrinsic to the thing, or is it because other people are viewing it like that? Kind of like love too, right? Like, you can have love that's, I guess, true if reciprocated, and then not if not. But it is still love if it's not reciprocated. Yeah, I guess that's what I guess I'm just curious, like, getting into the definition. There seems to be like another little element to throw in there.
No, I think we're just parsing between the concepts, and I don't think we disagree at all. I just think that there might be a perception. Oh, if you want to say you disagree, that's fine.
Fisticuffs. Fisticuffs. No.
That fight. No. This reminds me a lot of that Monty Python movie. Oh God, there's a. Hold on, give me a second.
The Life of Brian.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Whether or not it is the
United Front of Judea or the Judean United Front. Yes. Yes.
That's absolutely the question that we're hunting down. Yeah. But no, you're right. Eccentricity is like is it the artist attention, the audience talking about that. And I think I'll leave it up to the audience. How about that?
How about that?
I like that. Yeah. Corey's got some stuff here. He says, we used to have apprenticeships to masters. I think that's actually the best Western equivalent of any type of relationship widespread in our culture. Much more materialist, not the same. The Western church really did away with shamanism as such for our culture, in my opinion. He said we used to have druids and witchcraft and all of that.
Bring the cloaks back, man.
Bring back cloaks.
I do want cloaks to be a thing. We've got an atmospheric river going on. It's been raining. Yeah. Bring the cloaks.
I do really like the trade apprenticeship. Like, there's a lot of like things like that. I feel like that should be true in like higher levels of education too. But yeah, I don't know though if we've done away with it completely. I think it just got disguised, and then the information has been lost throughout history, especially when it comes to religion. Like, get into like the Mesoamerican religions pre-Columbian contact, you find out that they just hid their symbols within Christian and Catholic symbols, which is why you see the Virgin Mary in so many Mexican households is actually a symbol for Quetzalcoatl. But a lot of Mexican families forget that and just kind of carry on the tradition. So I don't know exactly if shamanism has been is at a loss. Maybe lost is the proper word, but I still think it's still there, just hiding.
But he did qualify it to say lost in Western culture, I think.
I mean, I think it's just a problem with modernity, right? Like, we're not. I mean, like. Unless we want to go back and sit in thatched huts and be hunter and gatherers, like, the need for the shaman is no longer. So society has done away with it.
You waited 30 years. Have you read the news about nuclear?
Oh, I have.
We'll be sitting in those hats.
This is not monetary advice, but folks, you might want to draw some money out of the ATM this weekend.
Got some gold. Some copper. Copper is a really great universal metal.
Again, we are not monetary advisors or financial advisors.
Yeah, get some bottle caps. I don't know what play Fallout. I don't know what you want to do. Yeah, no, but some interesting points for sure that Corey brings up. But I think I'm going to save the technological psychotech because we're getting to transhumanism and all that for a later episode, Psychotech Part 3.
And I think that actually will dovetail into my episode too. So actually that will be good because you'll be able to piggyback on some of the things I talk about in my episode.
Sweet.
So that'd be nice. But what else? You got anything else?
I'm drawing the conversation to a close. We can explore this topic in a more nuanced stage later. I don't know what word to use, sorry. But yeah, that's all I got for now.
Sounds good. Yeah, it sounds like we got more to talk about in episode 3 of Psychotech. Primarily how we might be using it in the future, I would assume. And maybe the lines between human psychotech and machine psychotech.
Yes, all that blurs together.
Yeah, that sounds like a fun one. All right. Ayla, you have anything else?
Gosh, no, you put me on the spot. I don't know.
Damn it.
No, you know what's funny? You said my name. I looked at the screen and I saw the comments and I saw Rasputin and I thought of the one thing you pointed out this whole episode and I got really flustered. So I think I'm just gonna say I'm a no comment.
Fun fact. Fun
just
fact.
blushed over there.
Yeah, no, but I will say to anyone listening now or later, definitely something to wonder about, like, who are the shamans now? What was a shaman? What was that role? And has it been divided into many roles, or has it become something, or is it totally missing and absent, and why? And that, I don't know, these are just really good questions I haven't thought about recently, so I hope you will too.
Definitely. And fun fact, Psychotech was Rasputin's nickname for his penis. So there you go.
No, it wasn't. What? Stop.
No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
That's where actually the term derives from.
Yes.
Oh my god.
Anyways. All right. Juvenile.
That's a wrap. That's a wrap.
Yeah, that is a wrap. I think we're going to be done with that. Leave you with that image. Well, thanks, Mike, for taking us through this fun conversation. It was a great one. Looking forward to part 3 of this, so you guys can stay tuned for that in the future on Friday nights at Exofathom 8 p.m. Thank you so much for tuning in, all of you. And special thanks to Corey, as always, for stopping by. He's a viewer of Screen Time Continuum, and he's graced his presence with us today, and we really appreciate that. So thank you, Corey. We appreciate you listening, man, and thank you for your comments too. It really insightful and a great addition to the show. So
you other listeners can take note. No,
yeah. So thanks so much. And anytime anybody else watching wants to leave a comment, we're always here to listen and to hear your thoughts on the subject we're talking about. We have a network of podcasts that we're a part of. You can catch those at Thinkering Talks on Facebook. We have a list of podcasts that you can go check out every day of the week: Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. So why don't you go check that out at Thinkering Talks on Facebook, and I will save you the long spiel of all of the names. And yeah, I think that's going to be it for us tonight, guys. Thank you again to Mike. Thank you again to Ayla. And thanks again, Corey. And thank you for listening. We really appreciate it. Hope that you have a wonderful evening. Until next time, Cognonauts, you stay out there, and we'll catch you on the next Exofathom. Good night.
Peace.
Don't be unwell. How's that?